Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Nutritional Revolution podcast. We have an exciting guest for you guys. We have Dylan Bowman. He is the leader and co-founder of Freetrail, a lifelong fan of sports media and longtime professional trail runner. And Dylan married those passions together with creating Freetrail, as we mentioned, in an effort to elevate the content and conversation in the world's fastest growing outdoor sport. In addition to leading the business and the team, Dylan's also the host of the Freetrail Podcast. So take note of his amazing sound quality on today's episode because he has a whole setup going. So thank you so much for joining us, Dylan.
It's my pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for the introduction.
Of course. So we told you a little bit before we hit record that we started doing two truths and a lie on our podcast. So before we get into the whole background of your history and how you got into running and starting Freetrail and all that stuff, let's let the people know what your two truths and a lie are.
Okay. First bullet point. I played lacrosse in college.
Okay.
Second bullet point. I met my now wife after stalking her on Facebook. Third bullet point. I won a very important eating competition in my hometown.
Ooh, okay. So Nia and I are going to guess which one's the lie. I feel like the first two could be real. So I'm going to say the eating competition is a lie. What do you think, Nia?
I was going to say number one, playing lacrosse in college.
Okay.
That's the lie.
Because we feel like he's maybe a runner. He did track in college, probably.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So Dylan, don't tell us the answers. We will reveal it at the end, but let's go ahead and just dive into a little bit of history. How did you get into running, trail running?
So I won't give you the full details because it'll reveal the
give away the lie.
Which one is the actual lie and truth, etc. But I got into trail running later in my life and found it sort of like in my early 20s. It was a moment in my life where I was sort of looking for something to do. I was always an athlete, and it was the first time where I had lost sort of like a competitive outlet, and therefore I sort of like had lost my identity a little bit, and I was just kind of like searching for something to do. I didn't really know what I wanted to do professionally either, like a lot of people who are fresh out of college.
Yeah.
I was living in Aspen, Colorado at the time, which of course is in the heart of the Rocky Mountains, a spectacular place, and I'd always loved running, and but I had never done it in like an organized way, and therefore just sort of like started running to keep in shape after sort of, moving into my early 20s. And I'm really dancing around, not revealing my life.
So I feel like maybe you played lacrosse.
I did. Okay. We'll go ahead and reveal that. So I played lacrosse in college. Anyway, I came out of college, wasn't playing lacrosse anymore. And but on the lacrosse team, I was always kind of the hustle guy. I was sort of the runner on the team, and always knew that I had like kind of a knack for just covering ground and having a big engine that could go forever. And anyway, I was living in Aspen. The natural thing was that I would start running trails when I started picking up running. And then I learned about sort of, especially ultra marathons, but especially the Leadville 100. It was something that really spoke to me at that time of my life when I was really kind of looking for something to devote my time and energy to. I ended up getting fully obsessed with accomplishing that goal, which I did for the first time in 2010 when I was 23 years old at the time.
Wow.
And it's been a long road ever since. My career has just kind of progressed on sort of a linear path since those early years, and I've been lucky to build a career within the sport and love it deeply, and now sort of transitioning into kind of a media career as I try to still milk a few more years out of my aging body as a professional athlete.
Amazing. So the media piece, Freetrail, tell us a little bit about what Freetrail is.
Yeah, so Freetrail is a business that we started just about a year and a half ago, and then subsequently rebranded. So we've only really been using the Freetrail brand for under a year now, and it's been an amazing journey, the most challenging thing that I've ever done in my life, something that has also brought me tremendous joy and satisfaction. And really what we are is a trail running brand to our core. And right now we focus on media especially, but also training and events. And we have a great sort of community that we've built around the business from all over the world who have become sort of unofficial kind of members of the team, and we incorporate them in everything that we do. We've made a lot of incredible friendships and have developed just wonderful relationships. And that's the power of trail running. And that's really what we've been trying to capture with our business. And, you know, to be a little bit more specific, we have a bunch of media verticals or categories that we operate within. Audio, we have my show, the Freetrail Podcast. We have the Trail Society podcast. And then we have another sort of fun music-oriented show called Trail Running Radio.
Cool.
We do a lot of video production. We just launched a new website where we do a lot of written publishing. And then we own a race in the Portland, Oregon area, the Gorge Waterfalls.
Amazing.
Under 250K. And we do some sort of like training and coaching and stuff as well. So that's
awesome.
In a nutshell. Yeah.
Yeah. What kind of stuff do you guys hone in on your podcast?
My show is mostly focused on the professional end of trail and mountain running. I'm somebody who, of course, has lived in that world for many years. And I had sort of recognized an opportunity to really help tell the stories of the professional athletes in the sport, all of whom are just extraordinarily special, friendly, hardworking, normal people. And I try to capture that in our conversations by getting to know them a little bit deeper than just their amazing performances, but also what they do outside of sport, what their backgrounds are, what their family life is like, and what sort of trials and tribulations they've been through in a lot of cases too, and try and humanize the professional athletes. And because I've been through all that stuff myself, I feel that they kind of feel they come into a friendly environment and they feel comfortable talking to me. And it's just brought me a ton of joy. Like you said in your intro, I've been a lifelong fan of sports media. In fact, I still listen to sports talk radio basically every single day. And so it's something that I fell into later in life, but feel like it comes naturally to me and I really love it.
Yeah. Did you do any like media studying in college or anything like that? Or
no, except for listening to sports radio every single day. Yeah, it's funny. I was just thinking about this actually, because I was just hanging out with a bunch of my old college lacrosse buddies. We were in London last weekend.
Oh, fun.
Just to hang out. There was a Denver Bronco football game. We're all Bronco fans. And so we used that as an excuse to go have a retreat in Europe. But
amazing.
I was thinking about when I was in like middle school, you know, when you used to have an radio alarm clock, you know, that would go off in the morning when you needed to get out for school. And every morning mine would turn on with the local sports talk radio show. It was called Lewis and Floor Wax in Boulder, Colorado. They broadcasted from Denver. Yeah. And it's just like, it's been in my DNA ever since, but I never had any official training. But I think, you know, my education was more as a listener and as a consumer.
Yeah, that's great. That's good. You could, I mean, that's how you find some of those things, right? You've been absorbing that information all this time and then realizing it's something that you truly enjoy doing yourself. So that's amazing. So we, of course, are a sports nutrition podcast. So we have to dive into nutrition tidbits and all that. So you mentioned getting some last bit of racing out of your air quotes aging body. Yep. I mean, you got to be mid-30s based off of some information I've already gathered from what you said. Yep. So
I'm 36. I'm 36. There's
okay.
Still life in the tank, but
yes,
I've also been through a lot of battles. So
yes. Have you had any like serious injuries with racing?
You know, actually, I've been pretty fortunate with my health throughout my career. I've had 2 major injuries, and both of which have been on each of my ankles. So I had one serious ankle injury in 2013 on my right ankle, and then I broke my left ankle in 2019. So, but for the most part, like both of those were like fairly serious, kept me out for 6-12 months sort of thing. But over the course of a 13-year career, I actually feel like I've been quite durable.
Yeah, that's great. So kind of on a nutrition spectrum, did you do any racing this last year?
Not much, unfortunately.
Okay.
This goes back to the conversation about Freetrail, but you know, it's been all consuming for me to try and build this business, and it's also been extraordinarily fun. My wife also gave birth to our first child, our son. His name is Rhodes. That was 12 weeks ago now.
Amazing.
So
Congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah, I have run 3 races this year. They've all gone pretty well. But I have to say, I haven't been focused on training and competition the same way that I have been for for the rest of my career. And I'm hoping to sort of be able to reprioritize that in 2023.
Yeah. So if we were to kind of like step back to maybe when you were doing a bit more racing, can you kind of like break down I don't know if there's one race in particular you'd love to like share about in terms of like your nutrition hydration game plan, or like share with the listeners like the race itself, but also the like distances and type of terrain I think is helpful for people to understand. Love to dive into some of that.
Sure. Maybe I'll give you a recent highlight from the 2021 Hard Rock 100, which is a iconic 100-mile race in the San Juan Mountains of Southern Colorado. And I had been wanting to do this race forever. And of course, like you always want to like have all your details dialed. And I felt like I did my nutrition fairly well, but it was also kind of a unique situation for me in that so I've always been somebody who likes to drink most of my calories in competition. I find that I'm also like somebody who likes to keep things very simple, and so I just love the elegance of being able to get my calories, my electrolytes, and my hydration all from a single source. And really just like kind of drink out of a bottle and know I'm getting all that stuff. And if I can time it and you know, get the dosage right and nail it, which is hard to do, obviously. I just find that my energy stays really even throughout the day. I don't have the highs and lows that you can sometimes have associated with doing something else by dumping in, you know, gels or bars or chews, things like that. So I generally like to drink my calories, and that's what I did at Hard Rock, and then supplemented with a product called Bobo's Oat Bars. And I didn't have any affiliation with them, but I'd like to shout them out because it's a cool brand. And I think the product is underrated for runners, especially ultra trail runners, because it's kind of simple food also, but it's super calorie dense. So if you get one of them down every like 2 hours, you're solid, because they're like 400 calories a bar. So I had, you know, maybe 4 or 5 of those early in the race. And then sort of 2/3 of the way into the course, I started getting a little bit queasy. The other thing that makes the race challenging is that it's at an average elevation of 11,000 feet. So super high altitude.
Wow.
And of course that challenges every part of the race, including your nutrition strategy. Ultimately, I was able to come back around when I started eating fruit at the aid stations. So just like orange slices and bananas, basically. And that allowed me to sort of rally near the end of the race after dealing with a bit of a low point. But that's maybe a good illustration of how I usually do it, is drink most of my calories, supplement with maybe some Bobo's Oat Bars or something similar. And then at the end of the race, kind of also try and get some fruit in. But it's very rare where you have a race where you don't have that at least like couple hours of low point, especially when you're for 23 hours, which I did that day basically. So that's a good example of a race where it went pretty well in the end, but where there was still things I could have improved.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think that helps people to get a picture. 23 hours you were out moving, racing.
One other detail too that I forgot to mention is that I had 0 gels in the race. That's why I wanted to bring this race up. It was the first race ever in my career where I had 0 gels or chews or anything like that.
That's great. In the drink mix, what's your go-to drink mix brand?
I use the Gnarly Nutrition Fuel 2.0 drink mix. I love the cherry cola flavor. I do have a sponsorship affiliation with them, so I'll disclose that. But I love the product. Yeah. And it's got all like the electrolytes. It's got branched chain amino acids in it. It's great flavor, you know, like that cherry cola flavor I don't get sick of.
Yeah.
And so I probably put down 20 bottles of that.
Wow. Yeah. That's impressive. I think that's a lot of the way that sports nutrition has been evolving, is to a lot of these like calories and electrolytes all in one bottle. But the Bobos thing you mentioned, I smile because that's one of the things we've added to our like carb loading list for our clients, because, and also, I don't know if you've come across the Bobos toaster pastries as well. Like those things are just, they're the size of an iPhone and have 50 grams of carbs in it. It's just like easy to get down. It doesn't take up a lot of space in your stomach. And yeah, they're great. Like all their product options are wonderful. So I love that.
I like the ones that are stuffed with like nut butter.
Yes.
Sometimes they can be kind of dry. You actually kind of need to buy fresh bars too.
Yes. Yeah.
So that would be my recommendation for Bobos. But yeah,
little
great
pro
product.
tip. And how do you, in a race like that, how are you transporting all that stuff? Are you carrying all of that on your person? Do you have aid?
Yes, carrying it all on my person. And of course, there are aid stations along the way where you resupply. And now in trail and ultra running, the equipment has advanced so much that basically everybody's wearing kind of one of these, what we call a racing vest. So it's sort of like a mix between a backpack and a t-shirt. It's sort of like the perfect meshing of equipment and apparel. They're all really nice. And of course, like I said, I get most of my calories from the bottles. So I have the bottles sort of positioned right up front to where I can just kind of put my head down and drink without having to like pull it out and then drink and put it back away. Again, I love the simplicity of that.
Yeah.
And then, for the bars and stuff, I have another dedicated pocket where I'll keep some of that solid food.
That's awesome. How many ounces does each of your bottles hold?
Half a liter.
Okay.
So that's like 17 ounces.
Yeah. So you're filling those up. You said 20 bottles. So
try and put one of them in an hour down.
Yeah.
250 calories per serving.
Wow.
With the Fuel 2.0 drink mix.
Yeah. And talking about that and being at elevation, it sounds like you were born in Colorado?
I was, yep.
Okay. So hopefully have a little advantage there too.
Yeah.
Did you go to that race from sea level from California?
I did. Yeah.
Okay.
So my wife and I had been living in Portland, Oregon, and I went and did a 6-week training camp in Mammoth Lakes, California before going out to Silverton, Colorado, which is the host town.
Awesome.
No,
okay.
I was very well acclimatized. And I think to your point of me growing up there, I naturally do better at altitude and I feel like I can acclimatize quickly.
That's awesome. Yeah. I think we've talked to a few athletes and some of them have that response. And then we have the others that are like, if I can't get up there 2 weeks before, I have to go like the day before, otherwise they're screwed. But so I think that's important, finding that spot that works for you, but also it sounds like you have some maybe genetic advantage too as well. Have you, talking about bottles and doing about 17 ounces per hour, is that something you've sweat tested to determine your fluid losses, or how'd you come up with that?
This is again, maybe just like a picture of the type of person I am. I like simplicity, and I'm just not a numbers guy, I'm not somebody who's actually like paying attention to how many calories an hour I'm taking in. Generally, I just try and go by feel. If I'm not feeling great, try and get more calories in. If I'm feeling awesome, feel like, okay, I'm probably doing something right. Let's try and continue on this path. But I've never done like a sweat test to try to determine that. But I do take that stuff into consideration. Like if it's an unusually warm day, then you're going to know that it actually, in some cases, I'll dilute the drink mix a little bit more, so get a little bit fewer calories from the bottle, just because oftentimes in the heat your stomach can not be as friendly. So there are certain things that I'll do based on the environmental conditions, but I've never done like a test.
I think it's interesting to hear. I mean, we've had handfuls of clients where they've essentially spent their time training to tolerate a pretty high level of dehydration, essentially. And I think they can get away with that. And then we look at, I think it was like Kipchoge, they like weighed him when he did his, and he lost 11 pounds, which was like an insane amount in like, I think it was like 2.5 hours or less, like, right. So it's like to think about that fluid loss.
He's already a pretty slight human being.
Yes. Yeah. So it's pretty, but again, that was for a shorter duration. I mean, I'm sure he couldn't have sustained something like that for 23 hours, right? So yeah, it's really interesting to see where the sweat loss kind of research is going. I find it kind of fascinating, really. So I think that's helpful for the listener to get a perspective of that too, from a fluid intake and a fueling perspective as well for ultra running like that and at elevation. We did get a handful of questions from our listeners, which I think some of, as I was telling you, could be a whole podcast episode. They sound like they're asking some nutrition-based questions. So if you feel like, let us know if you want to pass on any of these.
Sure.
But one person did ask about the Bobo bars, which you just mentioned. So he says, were Bobo bars a specific fuel choice for hard rock, and why? And I think you kind of answered that a little bit.
Yeah. I mean, I guess I kind of did answer it. So somebody's probably heard me talk about them before, but again, I think just to reiterate the point, I think they're great because it's simple food. The packaging is easy to get open, which I think is an underrated quality in a race specific bar, especially when you're 15 hours deep and you don't want to like wrestle with some nutrition packaging. And then they're super calorie dense. So if you can get them down, they become like something that can be a lifesaver at a point when, you need those calories late in the race.
Yeah. In a race like Hard Rock with the Bobos, are you trying to take down the entire bar, like kind of in a quick stretch of time, or are you pacing that consumption?
It kind of depends, but usually not. Usually I eat it over the course of like 20 minutes. I'll have it in my hand, and just kind of like take a bite every 5 minutes if I can.
Yeah. I think that's smart. Not this one you should be able to answer probably quickly. It says, not a running question, but it would be interesting to know which is his favorite UK beer.
This is because I just returned from London. Yeah. Let's see. I don't know if I remember. I definitely had a bunch of Stellas, which I think are UK based. You know what? I don't know if that's the truth, and somebody is going to absolutely be offended by my characterization of Stella.
So good.
UK based beer, but I definitely had a few pints over the weekend.
Yeah.
So this month I'm going off the sauce.
There you go. And I would know nothing about beer because I am not a beer drinker, but the next person says, I burn a ton of calories. Any ideas to keep fueled without having a bloated gut?
This is one of the reasons why I like drinking calories. And I think this is one of those topics that you'll find that there's a lot of disagreement on. I know there's some people who say that it's better to have kind of like a low calorie but high electrolyte drink mix, and then try and get your calories from maybe some solid foods or things like Bobos.
Yeah.
And I've just always found that I just like the simplicity, like I said, but also my stomach usually feels better that way. Like I never kind of get that really bloated feeling that you can sometimes get from putting too many different things in your body when you're having gels and salt pills and bars and maybe some snacks at the aid station and then dumping an electrolyte drink down your throat. If I can just like have one simple solution that sort of covers all that calorie expenditure, and then maybe have something like a Bobo's to just like fill my stomach and make me feel a little like more full.
Yeah.
That I just feel like I have less instances of stomach issues or bloating.
Yeah. Do you change any of your nutrition in the day before the race too, particularly to minimize any GI issues on race day?
Typically, I keep it pretty similar to how I would normally eat. One of the things that I would do is usually eat earlier in the evening. So try and have dinner sort of done and consumed by like 5 p.m.
Yeah.
And that way, just kind of like can more easily relax and chill, fall asleep, and then wake up and get ready to go.
Yeah.
But usually, I try and keep it pretty simple. I mean, obviously, like I eat a pretty high carbohydrate diet in general. So I may kind of default towards something that is your stereotypical pre-race meal, just kind of simple pasta with red sauce or pizza, or like maybe, a bunch of rice and vegetables, things like that.
Yeah, I think that's smart. I mean, we've definitely seen athletes where they maybe we're trying to carb load, but they end up like carb and fiber loading. And we can see that lead to definitely GI issues or bloating definitely the next day. So it could be something to be mindful of. And everybody's a little bit different, I think, too, with their, like you're saying, your GI issues and like how well they absorb stuff and what products work for different people. I think you're spot on with that. Is like, we hear plenty of people are like, fuel in the pocket and hydration in the bottle works great for some people. And then calories in the bottle work great for other people. And so I think it's experimenting too with like different forms of maybe sugars or combinations of sugars, ratios of sugars, but also practicing, right? And nothing new on race day, I think, is a well-known term. And then we had another question. They said, this is like 3 questions in one question. So I'll start with the first part. They just say, tips for travel ?
Okay. Yeah, I mean, so this is obviously a big question, and kind of depends on what you're doing and how much flexibility you have. But it is a really important thing to consider if you are taking the time and making the expenditure that it takes to go do like an international race. Like, it's not something you want to screw up, and I've screwed it up a couple times in my career, and I can tell you how. Maybe to start with that, twice in my career, I've flown to big international races, one in Cape Town, South Africa, and one in Hong Kong.
Wow.
Where I felt super fit, ready to race, and before the race got super sick, came down with, some sort of weird traveler's stomach bug. That happened twice in the space of like 13 months.
Oh no.
And so of course, when it happened once, I was like, oh man, bad luck. This is silly. But then it happened almost exactly a year later. And then I was like, oh my gosh, I got to get this under control.
Yeah.
I met with someone named Kara Mars. So shout out to Kara Mars. She's a nutritionist based in Steamboat Springs, Colorado. She reached out because I put up sort of like an Instagram post, sort of like, can somebody help me?
Yeah.
And she really helped me to like understand this like gut health phenomenon a little bit more. And I think because I was aging a little bit, or, getting older, so to speak. And like had certainly like had my fair share of really hard days, had my fair share of, dumping a bunch of kind of sugary drink mix into my stomach, and probably was in a place where my gut health just wasn't really awesome. She sort of like introduced me to the idea of probiotics, and especially taking probiotics for the month before you go to travel to a race. Make sure your gut health is in a place to where if you are exposed to something that could make you sick, you have a better chance of fighting off. At least that's my understanding. I'm not a doctor or a scientist, obviously, but that's actually was a really helpful thing that I have since implemented, and knock on wood, I haven't had any similar issues.
That's awesome.
Other things to consider is, try and get there early. If you're going to spend the time and spend the money and take the time to go to Europe, for example, you're setting yourself up for a tough day if you arrive like the day before, or even just a couple days before. I've always tried to arrive a week early for any international race that I do, so that my body can adjust, I can get some sleep. You can sort of battle off the jet lag and stiffness that comes from international travel.
Yeah.
So yeah, those are a few tips. The probiotic thing and trying to arrive early.
Awesome. And with the probiotic, is that like just a lactobacillus strain? Is it a multi-strain?
To be honest, now, so at first, Kara got me on one of the products that she recommended. Now I just buy something from Whole Foods. I don't really pay attention to it too much. Maybe it's more of a placebo than anything, but it seems to help a lot.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, the gut is obviously a big part of our immune system. We've been following along on some of the research looking at immune system and like defense and what's going on with the immune system markers. And the presenter was talking about how they're seeing this kind of like suppression in the immune system defense mechanism in the 3 to 6 hours post like big events. And so they're altering how and when teams travel based off of when they finish games or finish practices. They like won't let them go into like airports and stuff like that in that window because of that immune system drop, which is very interesting. And makes sense. Yeah. So yeah, really cool. Let's see, this person, the other kind of stuff they talked about was, or put in their question was you kind of mentioned the getting there early so you can adjust to the jet lag. So they threw rest in there, but they also mentioned acclimation. This is kind of part of the travel. Is there any tips for that?
Yeah, I think this is an important thing to talk about. I mean, oftentimes when you travel to do a race, it's in a place that potentially has different environmental conditions than you're used to at home. This can be heat or cold or altitude, humidity, things like that. In fact, this week coming up, the Trail and Mountain World Championships are taking place in Chiang Mai, Thailand. And I'm sure, especially going into the fall and winter months in the Northern Hemisphere, that a lot of the, at least American and European athletes are going to be, struggling in the heat, and the people who will perform well will have thought about that heat acclimatization prior to the race. Like I mentioned last year before Hard Rock, I went and did a 6-week altitude training camp, and that was one of the best races of my career. And I think I can attribute that to the fact that I arrived feeling super confident in my acclimatization. There's other ways that you can confront altitude, using altitude tents or exercising in simulated altitude in a chamber or using a mask. And then, there's other things that you can do. For heat, you can do some sauna training, which is something I've done prior to races like Western States that are unusually warm. I've never done anything to sort of prepare for cold races, but I imagine there's something you can do for that as well. But those are a few examples.
Awesome. Do you, out of curiosity, like this, with regards to the sauna, do you do steam sauna, dry sauna?
I've always done dry sauna.
Yeah. I'm always interested. I mean, definitely the research looks at dry, I would say the majority, but I'm curious with something like, talk about, you said Shanghai, or I think about Kona and high humidity. Be curious if there's benefit potentially.
The protocol that we used, again, was specifically before Western States, which is sort of a dry heat also. And what we did was go into the sauna for 30 or 40 minutes immediately after your training, so that your core temperature is already elevated. So you go in and you're sweating. And it's kind of a battle to get through. And then the other detail that was prescribed to me was to try not to drink while you're in the sauna, and also don't rapidly rehydrate when you get out. Sort of slowly rehydrate throughout the day. And I would do that 2 or 3 times per week for probably the last 7 or 8 weeks leading up to Western States.
That's awesome. That's very similar to our protocol. That's spot on. I think that's definitely a helpful tool. And then let's see, you mentioned the probiotics. This person says tips for travel too, with regards to nutrition. I would imagine you're bringing all your own nutrition, maybe checking a bag.
I probably should, after the 2 experiences that I've had, but I also am I don't know, it's just simple kind of avoid inconvenience type person. I always travel with my mother-in-law's trail mix. She always makes me a huge bag of trail mix that must cost her $100 to put together. I always travel with that. It's a nice little luxury. Sometimes I do travel with other kind of snacks and stuff, but certainly not traveling with the food that I'm expecting to eat throughout the week that I'm there. I almost always will, spend a lot of time at the grocery store and at the local restaurants experiencing the cuisine and the culture. But I have become much smarter with that, for example, if you're traveling to Cape Town, I think the reason I got sick is because I had a salad, and especially in places where it's not necessarily safe to drink the tap water, I think is where you should be especially cautious, because oftentimes they'll use that water to wash things like vegetables. And anyway, that's my understanding. I don't know exactly where it came from. It could have been because I had bad gut health and I was just exposed to something that any other person would have been able to shrug off. But
I've seen people with I don't know how effective they are, but the little sanitation stick things that glow that they put in water.
Oh yeah. I've never used one of those. No, but I have used iodine tabs when I drink out of streams out on long training runs. And maybe that's something I should look into buying and traveling with.
Yeah. And that could, I mean, some people could see that as a way to strengthen the microbiome, or might be, who knows, getting something out there. Okay. So I think that covers our audience questions. Those were excellent responses. So to kind of touch a little bit back, I want to jump back to your hard rock situation. After something like that, 23 hours of racing, what does the next 24 hours look like from a nutrition perspective? Are you hungry? Are you forcing yourself to eat? Are you really hitting the fluids? What does that look like?
So trying to recollect, I think I finished at like 4 o'clock in the morning. So
wow.
Went back to the crib, crashed out a little bit, probably had a few bites of food, but it would have been something that was just kind of sitting around the house, some toast or bagel or something like that. But it does often take time for your appetite to come back after a big effort like that. So, but I do recall that we got up actually pretty early, it was probably 7:30, and walked down to the local coffee shop, and there I got a big cup of hot coffee and some sort of pastry that I can't recall. And that at least again was sort of like simple food that I could get down. And of course the caffeine was helpful after running 23 hours and then sleeping for maybe 2.
Yes.
And then of course, in the afternoon, that's when sort of like the real appetite comes back. And that's when I'll try and get a much bigger meal in, ideally with some good like protein in it and like really salty and heavy. Oftentimes your appetite comes back in a really major way. I do also recall later that afternoon we went down to the river and watched some more finishers sort of come back into Silverton, and drank 2 or 3 beers down by the river, which is something that I am definitely not against. And then try and get another big meal. And I do remember that night we went out to a big like communal pizza gathering at a local restaurant in Silverton. So
awesome.
That's kind of what the next day would typically look like. Again, nothing crazy special, just kind of let your appetite and your cravings guide you, and try and avoid the sweet stuff for the most part, because I again drank 20 bottles of hyper sugary stuff. So,
yeah. In the drink mix that you were consuming during the race, is there caffeine in that at all?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
The
whole way.
Yeah. Okay. There you go. Yeah. The cola flavor, I would imagine they'd put some caffeine in that. That's impressive. I mean, the GI stuff is something where we see that, I mean, with athletes a lot, right? Is like the appetite is not there post, and definitely not for sweet stuff. Like you're saying, that's the last thing they want. So I think that's always helpful to hear, to kind of help them get back and listen to your body and start rehydrating and getting some salty stuff in, I think is always good. With kind of prep or even recovery, do you ever utilize any supplements or anything like that, aside from the probiotics you mentioned with travel? Like, has there been anything that you've noticed helps with your performance?
Good question. So occasionally I'll take, like when I was in Mammoth training at altitude, I took an iron supplement because I've always been told that that's helpful. I typically do take like just a multi-day vitamin every day, which is again just something that I get at Whole Foods. Don't put a lot of thought into. But I always forget at least a couple days a week, so I probably actually have it 3 or 4 days a week. And then I actually have been recently taking a BCAA supplement, branched chain amino acids, and this is actually something that also comes from Gnarly Nutrition, and something that I've learned about recently that I think is actually really underrated. Again, maybe it's placebo, maybe it's a personal thing. I don't eat that much meat. My wife grew up vegetarian, and therefore I probably don't get nearly enough protein in my diet because we don't eat hardly any meat at home. Don't really put a lot of thought into protein. And so I every morning I have this BCAA drink mix, sort of like before I go out in my training. And I find that is very helpful. Like, just for some reason, it's a subtle thing I can't quite put my finger on, but just kind of like feel a little extra pep, like my muscles are operating or functioning just at a little higher level. And I know, just because I've sort of looked into it, that I know amino acids are important for protein synthesis. And since I maybe don't get enough protein in my diet, I think that it's actually an intelligent thing for me to supplement. But aside from those couple of things, no, there's not much else that I supplement.
That's awesome.
Top of my head. Oh, and also when I was living in Portland in the winters, I got a blood test that indicated that I was low in vitamin D. And of course, when you're not getting a lot of sunlight, especially in those long winter months in the Northwest, that can be a good thing to supplement.
Definitely. Yes. And talking about immune system, that's a big player as well. So we're getting close on time, but I'd love to hear, what is a day in the life of Dylan look like right now?
Oh my
dadding, training.
Oh my gosh.
What does it look like?
Absolutely frantic recently. I basically wake up at 5 and white knuckle my way until like 8:30 and then just tumble into bed. But to add some color to it, I get up very early. I always set my alarm for 5 a.m. And so I just, like I mentioned, we just had a baby 12 weeks ago. And he's actually been a great sleeper, but I really need to take advantage of those early hours when he and my wife are still asleep. So get up at 5, I'm out. I just kind of leisurely get going in the morning, have a cup of coffee and a little bit of breakfast, usually just like a piece of toast. And then that BCAA stuff, out the door at 6, try and get my training in early. Most of the times I've only been able to run like an hour recently, come back. And then I've been pretty much like just full gas on Freetrail work recently, which means just kind of like on my computer, recording podcasts, making content, reaching out to sponsors, following up, answering a billion emails. And and then of course, like intermittently needing to grab the baby, let Harmony go do her thing. And we just moved also back to California, so that's been an added complication and stress. And then at some point we got to figure out grocery shopping and cooking dinner, and then I usually work until about 8 o'clock every night, and then bleary eyed and crumble into bed and do the next day.
Goodness.
This is something I'm thinking about right now. I mean, I wouldn't recommend it. It's not sustainable, and it's been really detrimental to my health and my performance and my, just overall like mental health and stuff too. Like it's something that needs to change. But it's also kind of something that happens when you're in the throes of like building a business from the early stages that is like your baby, your life's work, and something you're bootstrapping with your own life savings, and that you have like your whole identity wrapped up into. Like it's something that like means a lot to me, and that requires the effort I'm putting in now. But we are currently taking steps to sort of bring in more support that will hopefully allow me to take some things off my plate, especially things that I don't enjoy as much and that I'm not as good at, and hand those off to people who are more competent and better at them, which will just improve my life so much. So wish me luck. I'm hoping that sort of becomes a reality here in the next month or two.
That's awesome. That's exciting. And with the like racing training, do you have your eyes set on anything in the future?
Yeah, so I'm actually going out to Japan next month for a race called the Izu Trail Journey. It's a 40-mile race, sort of southwest of Tokyo. I love Japan. My apparel sponsor is a brand called Goldwyn, based in Japan. So we're working on making some cool product right now. And so I'm going to go out there for some meetings to work on the product. I'm going to run a race while I'm there. And, but again, like I haven't been training in a serious way. I'm not fit. So it's going to be more of like a fun adventure than anything else.
That's awesome.
Next year, I really hope to get back to it. My plan is to target UTMB, the Ultra Trail de Mont Blanc in August of next year.
Wow.
That, of course, is the biggest, most important race in the world, something that requires full attention. So if it does indeed end up on my calendar, I'm going to, give it everything I've got there.
That's awesome. Can you, for the listeners, explain UTMB, like location, distance, terrain, give us a breakdown?
So for the listeners, you must go and experience UTMB at some point in your life or in your career. Excuse me. It is a 105-mile race that circumnavigates the Mont Blanc Massif, which is, of course, in Western Europe. The race starts and finishes in Chamonix, France. And it's the most spectacular single loop course you could ever imagine. You go through France, Italy, and then Switzerland before crossing back into France. It's in those 105 miles, it has 33,000 feet of climbing and descending. So it's a true mountain race. It also is the Super Bowl. So it's the most competitive race of the season. It's where everybody shows up in peak fitness with massive determination, and that always leads to fun and dramatic racing. So I'd really hope to tee that one up one more time in my career before I get too old.
That's awesome. That sounds amazing. And let's see, we will disclose the lie from your two truths and a lie. So you played lacrosse in college, which I think we've ruled that one out as the lie. Met your wife after stalking her on Facebook, and won a very important eating competition in your hometown. So I got a 50-50 chance right now of being right. So which one was your lie?
My lie was subtle. It was that my wife stalked me on Facebook before we met and got married. And she didn't reveal this to me until after we'd been dating for like 5 years. And so,
she didn't want to scare you away.
It was meant to be. Yeah, it's actually a funny story. I can tell it really quickly. Basically, in 2011, I finished second at the Leadville 100 in Colorado. Amazing. This was around the time when Born to Run was published. And my wife had read the book, sometime around that time, and was like looking at the results of the race. And she saw that, I was 25 at the time and she was 24. So we're about the same age. And she was moving to Aspen, and which was where I was living. So she was like, I got to look up this 25-year-old in Aspen. ended up getting a job at the place that I worked. I took her on her like employee orientation. Anyway, I was a total nervous wreck. Didn't really talk to her for 6 months, even though I had a massive crush on her. But ultimately, it all worked out, and now we've been married for 5 years, together for almost 11. So,
I love hearing love stories. That makes me so happy.
It was funny. It was her that told me to use that as my lie too, because I was like, I don't know what to say. I don't know what to say.
Yeah, I love it. She helped you. She's a partner in crime. Amazing. So where can people find you, find Freetrail, share the deets with us?
Yeah, sure. So I'll start with Freetrail. Check us out online, freetrail.com. We are really, really trying hard to be a core source of information, inspiration, content in the sport of trail running, the best sport in the world. On Instagram, we are at Run Freetrail. Same on Twitter. We have a Strava group. You can join our community called Freetrail Pro. You can find all the information on freetrail.com for that. And then for myself, my podcast is the Freetrail Podcast. You can find that on all major platforms and on YouTube. You can subscribe to our YouTube channel, also under the Freetrail moniker. My personal handle at Dylan Bow on Instagram and Twitter. I'm on Strava, and occasionally writing some articles for freetrail.com. So
amazing.
Yeah, just follow me on Instagram or whatever. That's typically where I share out most of the information. But appreciate you guys having me on the podcast.
Absolutely. And Nia will include all those in the show notes for the listeners, so you can go follow Dylan all over the place. Thank you, Dylan, for joining us.
It was a pleasure. Thank you.